everybody. Welcome to the very first episode of On the Clock with Caroline. I'm Caroline Clarke, Chief Brand Officer, Women of Power at Black Enterprise. And I'm really thrilled to be launching this series where we're going to spend a little bit of time with a broad cross-section of people, just trying to understand how we are navigating through this extraordinary time in our lives, day by day, one day at a time. That's the only way to take it, right? So our very first guest, I'm thrilled, is someone who's become a dear friend of mine in a very short time. Crisis has a way of creating, intensified friendships, which is a silver lining. So our first guest is a social activist, an entrepreneur, and author of a beautiful book, The Bold World, a memoir of family and transformation. If you are looking for something to help get you through this time, this is a perfect way to spend it. Read this book. It is beautiful, it is moving, it is honest, and it is original. And it discusses things that we need to discuss as a community, particularly in the Black community. And so I am thrilled to welcome Jodie Patterson. Hi, Jo.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. So listen, I'm not trying to call you out, but I'm seeing a little bit of subway tile, and I'm wondering where in the world you are, girl.
So, there are 7 of us in my house that are all needing space to work and to learn. And so I'm in my bathroom. It's literally the only space that's available and that has light. And I'm hoping it has Wi-Fi.
Well, it has light, it has Wi-Fi, and it has good acoustics. So,
well
done.
Good.
Now,
everything is flexible these days, right? We have to be mobile and flexible.
You have to be super, super flexible. So, the first thing we need to talk about is the fact that you are one of the very fortunate people who actually had COVID-19 and came through it, and thank God are on the other side of it. So these stories are only just starting to emerge. And I think it would be helpful to talk to us about what exactly you experienced in terms of symptoms and how you navigated just getting through to recovery.
So I'm now weeks out of the first symptoms. So I'd say probably now 5 weeks. And if not more, and I'm just now started piecing together all of the pieces, all the components. For a long time, it was a blur, and I couldn't quite connect the dots, but now that I've had some time to think and to look at my notes, because I journaled through this whole process and stayed in touch with friends like you, I am seeing trying to see the big picture. Yeah. My symptoms were so atypical. I had exhaustion, right? But I'm a mom of 5. I'm on any given Wednesday, I'm exhausted. But I was really, really tired that particular week, and I was traveling a lot and working a lot, and so I had some exhaustion. I had when the symptoms really kicked in, I had a migraine. I had a debilitating migraine that was like a piercing knife almost in my head, and then all the way down my spine.
Wow.
So much that I couldn't get out of bed. And then I had chills and these strange body twitches that I can only sort of put into language now because I'm hearing other people have them, sort of like spazzes, where, almost like currents going through your body. And so I was feeling that in my limbs, my arms and my legs, and these sort of surges. A slight fever. I barely was at 100, sometimes 99, and that was just for a few days. Loss of smell. And it's funny because that loss of smell, I just realized it was loss of smell. For a long time, I was thinking that, I was like, I haven't showered in a couple of days because I was really sick. I don't smell.
Right.
Isn't that true? I thought it was just, I noticed that I wasn't smelling the things that I would normally smell. Air,
right.
Body and breath. And the things that were around me, flowers. At the time, I was in the hospital.
Right.
But now that the language is coming out and the stories are being shared, I realized I had lost my sense of smell.
Yeah.
And brain fog, which has continued. And I don't mean that in a funny way. I really mean, I can't get words out. I have to say, what's that thing that looks like this, that sits over there? And they're like, blender, Mom, blender. So brain fog. And that was a lot of, for weeks, I've maintained that, some of those. And now, weeks later, I have zero fever. I've never had any respiratory issues. Thank goodness. But if you looked at what the news was tracking as symptoms for COVID and symptoms for like the flu, usually they were putting me on the flu, like my symptoms were falling more on the flu side, chills and shakes, but
you were tested. And so you're one of that. I mean, testing is such an issue. It remains an issue, right? There's so many people who've had symptoms, and in some cases severe symptoms, but they haven't been able to get tested. In your case, you're one of the people who actually shows up in the statistics because you tested positive.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that is who gets tested and who doesn't. Is a lot of it is timing. When in the crisis, did you hit?
Yeah.
A lot of it is regionality. Where are you? Right? What state is your state in? What state of emergency is your state in?
Right.
And then also all of the biases. Who deserves, quick, immediate response?
Yeah.
Right?
You had to really advocate to be tested, right? You've talked about showing up as a Black woman, needing medical assistance, and particularly now when the statistics are making it devastatingly clear that the African American and Black community, the LGBT communities are overarching in both contracting and dying from this virus. That self-advocacy and seeking medical assistance and having access to it becomes critically important. So can you talk a little bit about your experience with that?
I'm so used to being an advocate, right? All day long, I advocate for my kids in my home, my 5 children. I advocate for children all over the world. I advocate for communities that have, that I feel have been overlooked. It's particularly LGBT communities and Black families and moms. And then here I find myself in a situation where I needed someone to advocate for me. And I had no physical presence of an advocate. I took myself to the hospital in like whatever I could grab. It was like a black hoodie, some men's pajama pants, and some Nike sneakers. And I showed up and no one saw me, in a sense, right? And I know that is an issue in terms of just hospitals in general. You become a patient. But I felt that, and I felt that multiplied as a Black woman, and a Black woman without a title, and a Black woman without, I hate to say it, a purse and a bag, and the things that our mothers and our grandmothers have taught us. When you walk outside, you put your best foot forward so that people see you and understand you. And so in the hospital, what we find is that we just don't have all of the presentation that lets people know something about us. Yeah. And so we rely then, we're subjected to our biases. And I felt that. And so I had to really I had to think strategically when I was sick, which is a hard thing to do. But I had to think about who's going to advocate for me, who's going to be able to speak the language of hospitals, which is a serious language, and the language of authority and compassion. It's like and I literally made a list in my journal. Okay, who are the folks that who are on my A team? Yeah. And I just went down that list and I made sure I stayed in touch with them every single day for the 2 weeks that I was in the hospital.
Yeah. Now, we're all living in a reality where there is more isolation than we're accustomed to, right? So you have people in your home. Some of us have people in our homes, others live alone. But regardless of where we are on the spectrum, there's greater isolation. There's less, there's more social distancing. But when you were in the hospital, you were completely isolated and quarantined. And I know you developed sort of a rhythm that kept you going and got you through it. And I think that can be really instructive to all of us as we're dealing with, sort of the rigidity of the restrictions around how much we're able to reach out and see other people and do things. Talk about that system, because I think what's important in this case in particular is that you were navigating time and space, but you were also navigating fear, because there's still so many more questions around this virus than answers. And you didn't know how bad it was going to be or what your mortality reality would be. And your family couldn't even come visit you. So how did you get through that time?
Sorry. Luckily I have this setup typically in my normal life pre-COVID, where I spend a lot of time alone. I'm a person that loves pattern. I have all kinds of rituals that other people think are annoying, but they work for me. And so I applied those because it's hard in crisis to do something different. Oftentimes we do what we know. And I know pattern and I know habit and I know things that are self-soothing.
Yep.
So I tried to remember to do the things that I really enjoy from the hospital room, which was, just a tiny little box.
Right.
And so I made sure that I walked in circles every day and stretched, little stretches. I made sure that I cleaned. I mean, I like to clean my house. And so I would say to the nurse, no, I'll clean, I'll get the garbage. She's like, but you can't leave. I'm like, but I'll just pack it up. And, I did the things. I cleaned my room. I wrote for 10 hours a day, sometimes literally 10 hours a day. I exercised, which is really just stretching for 2. I meditated. I had my lotions and body washes and facial washes. And so I did that process every day. It was pretty regimented and strict, but I had to fill up 12 hours sometimes without going nutty. Yeah. And so I think about that. And when I came out of the hospital, I came back home, I still remembered that feeling of, okay, what makes me happy? And I tried to share that with my family. We have to remember what makes us happy. And then do those things, because in crises, you're kind of panicking and you're like, so recalling what makes us happy in these moments is really good. For me as a writer, I enjoy writing. My folks were like, you don't have to work in a hospital, Jodie. And I said, no, writing for me, it happens to be my work, but it's really my passion. So finding these moments and repeating them over and over again. Yeah. It's like a long game. This is not a short game. We're not talking about doing them one day. It's like we have to remember to repeat the joy every single day.
Yeah. I know your role as a mom is intrinsic to everything that you are and everything that you do. And you happen to be a mom of 5, which, anybody looking at you, of course, never thinks that. And I know that the people in the hospital probably thought you were 25, but you're twice that.
And that was the problem. They kept thinking I was a young, naive girl, Black girl.
Not a seasoned woman.
Not a seasoned woman, not a seasoned Black woman, right? Yeah.
Yeah. But I know that role as a mother is critically important to you. And you happen to be a mom who is navigating all of this with 5 children in very different spaces and stages of life. So I know your daughter, Georgia, your first baby girl is overseas in Europe. And then you have boys, at home of different ages and stages. Can you talk about navigating that and how do you deal when you have a child who is still overseas, you can't put hands on her, even though she's a grown woman, and then you have boys at home who are at different stages. How are you helping all of them to navigate through this and stay positive?
It's like what Toni Morrison said, the thing she said, what's grown to a mother?
Exactly.
Grown don't mean anything, right?
Exactly.
I wanted all of my babies from 28 down to 10 with me. And that was impossible because I wasn't even able to see anyone. I was when I was in the hospital, but also when I got home, I was trying to distance myself from folks because I had an enormous amount of guilt for being sick and sick for so long. So I had to figure out ways to navigate. I had to figure out ways to parent remotely and mother remotely and stay connected remotely. And part of that was actually saying, I can't do the things I always do, right? So I'm not teaching, very clear messages. I'm not setting boundaries from, miles away. I was trying to just interact. So each kid I chose to do something with. My youngest, we did an hour of riddles, right? Because usually I'm like,
how old is your youngest?
10. And, he's the one that comes at me all day long. Mom, would you rather jump off a plane or dive deep into the ocean and not know how to swim, right? He's full of riddles and what if, and I usually don't have any time for that, or I can get through maybe 1 or 2 of the what ifs and then I'm off to doing something else. But I was like, baby, I got hours for you. Give me all your riddles. Give me your best what ifs. So we spent a really good time doing that. My oldest, who's in Switzerland, she and I talked like almost like two grown women. I say almost because she's always my baby, but we had a different type of conversation, and it wasn't about me teaching her. It was just about us listening. I have one son who's 14, and he's probably the one who thinks I know the least. And
like every 14-year-old, right?
right, like every 14-year-old. And so I spent a lot of time with him just telling, I was reading his manga books. I picked up one of his manga books and I said, I'm committing to reading an entire manga book. I don't like them. It's totally not my style of literature, but
Right.
I've committed to it. So now I'm onto page 100 in one of his manga books.
Okay.
So I just chose, one thing to go deep in with my kids. And that was parenting for me.
Yeah.
I wasn't able to set the rules. I wasn't able to make sure they had their teeth brushed or their homework done, but it was about some sort of like listening and interacting that I had not been able to do on that level in the past months because I was working or busy or cooking.
Yeah.
And that took some patience because I take a lot of, I define myself in my parenting, for better or for worse. People say, don't live through your kids. I'm like, you haven't had a child yet.
Right.
Of course we live through our children. What else are we supposed to do?
Right.
But so I define myself through my parenting. And when I wasn't able to parent in the same way, got really sad and really depressed. And that can only last for so long. So I had to find new ways. And on top of the fact that we were miles apart, we also are a family that is blended. So I've been married twice and I have 2 ex-husbands. And so that dynamic also plays into it. I had to make sure, as parents, had to make sure that although we don't agree on much as exes, we had to agree on how we were going to approach this situation, right? And the one thing that we agreed on was calm. We are not going to bring the hysteria to our kids.
Right.
It is challenging, but I have to say there are a lot of us that are most parents right now. Many parents are separated from their children.
Yeah.
And if it were a regular day, we would be not thinking much about it. But the fact that we don't know how far this is going to last or what the other side looks like is forcing us parents to reimagine.
Yeah.
And that's one of the best things that came out of it for me. The ability, the necessity of imagination. So we're unsure of the future. We're unsure of tomorrow and finances and food and health, but we can use our imagination to create what tomorrow should be.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So as we talk about, the broader picture and how this is all impacting the Black community, the LGBT community in, really, really significant ways. As usual, we all know the phrase, America gets the flu, Black America gets the pandemic, right? The full-on pandemic. I know that, these communities mean a great deal to you. So when you think about imagination, reimagination, what sorts of suggestions, solutions, potentially, can we come up with? And I know in your role as head of the board of the Human Rights Campaign, this is something that you all have really stepped into in a significant way. Can you first just tell us what the Human Rights Campaign is for those who don't know, and then talk about what you all are doing in terms of addressing, this rising tide of needs for us?
So the Human Rights Campaign is our largest LGBT human rights campaign. And we have programs that speak to and address and live in communities that are underserved and invisible to some folks. So LGBT communities, Southern communities, faith communities, communities that wrap around children and teens, and the global issues around the LGBT community. So we have 11 programs that run and help change hearts and minds with everyday people. And then we have a political side that helps to lobby and pushes for elected officials that are pro-equality. So we're both political and we're hearts and minds, legislative and hearts and minds. And I am the newly elected chair of the board of the HRC Foundation. And we also have a newly appointed president, Alfonso David, who is our first person of color, our first Black man to lead our organization. So it's a time that's I believe I'm the first Black chair.
Yeah, I believe you are.
Yeah, and that's really not so much of it's a reflection on the sign of our times that in 2020, you know, we have our first Black leaders in many areas, and I'm like, okay, come on, guys, let's catch up.
Right.
But we're happy that we are in this moment, because I think a lot of what HRC has done has been preliminary work. So to say that we are somewhat prepared for this moment of COVID is a strange thing to say.
Yeah.
But it is true in many ways. So in the neighborhoods that are hit the hardest, in our poor neighborhoods, in our neighborhoods of color, in our LGBT neighborhoods, HRC has built community there. So we can go directly there to help serve needs and to help speak for folks and speak with folks. And so, and I look at that and I think, okay, how can our families think in similar ways, right? Because HRC is this very healthy, robust organization with a very healthy, robust board and a very healthy, robust budget. And I look at my family and I think, how can we be robust? How can we be healthy financially and socially and sturdy, right? And a lot of it is pre-planning. You know, what are the systems that we've set up to support so that we can rebound from things, so that we can address issues when they come up that we're not expecting? But it's like a lot of forward thinking. So what I like about my work at HRC is it allows me to work with communities that I respect and that I'm a part of, but it also allows me to be a better parent. They don't know it, but I'm actually drawing from HRC and thinking, how can I take these lessons of an institution that actually works and bring it to my institution as a family? And then I do the opposite. I think of, what have I done at home that really works, right? As a mother, taking a bird's eye view of the situation and then bring that to the board. So a lot of the work I do at HRC is bringing a motherly perspective. And I don't mean motherly like hugs and kisses and snuggles. I mean motherly like strategic architectural thinking, right? What is this? What am I building? I'm building family, I'm building children, I'm building a community. And then I bring that, and a lot, I know I'm going on a tangent, but this idea of building community is very important right now.
Yeah.
And this idea of reimagining. You asked me, how can we reimagine? Folks think that people might think that word is trivializing a moment right now with a lot of death and a lot of loss and a lot of illness. And I'm not trivializing it. What I mean is that we're going to have to use some flexible mind work, some of that brain that designs things that have not yet been done, to change one system, which clearly is not working, to another system. So
Right.
Change one system that has been based on, the highest return, the most efficiency, and change that to something much more humane. That is sort of like from the bottom up, right? A more humanistic relationship approach. And that's how we build our communities. And so I think a lot about this, Caroline. It's all I'm thinking, like, how do we build a community, whether it's a board or a home?
Yeah. Do you think that we have the capacity? I think across all platforms in our lives, this is shifting things.
Mm-hmm.
And as you said at the outset, there's so much uncertainty that we're navigating. And it's why I see your journey with this illness, in the eye of it, as really sort of helping you to prepare for dealing with where we are now, because we're all dealing with this illness, whether we have personally had it or cared or known anyone who personally has it. No one is not impacted. And I don't think we're yet even aware of fully how we're being impacted. But the one thing we know is that we're navigating just extraordinary uncertainty without, frankly, a tremendous amount of leadership.
Mm-hmm.
So it calls upon us to lead, right? And I think particularly because of how this is impacting our community, we are going to have to lead our way through and out of this.
Mm-hmm.
We know that. And so one of the things I'm hoping to use these conversations to do is how can we best utilize the time we have now, each day? What can we do, all of us, to somehow help propel all of us through and out of this? Are there any things that you've, thought about or talked to your children about? Are there things that your children even have said that have struck you in their vision for, how to survive this, all of us, and ultimately thrive beyond it?
Yeah. And yes, I have some thoughts on that. And these are lessons that I was thinking about in general as parenting lessons, right? And so whether we're parenting our children or mothering a board or mothering a nation, some of these principles are evergreen, right? And so one of the things that I know is really important is to dial down the panic, right? Dial down the drama and sort of usher in the calm. And so I've been doing that I've been trying to do that every day with myself and with my children. And it's the way we speak and it's the words we choose. And it's just an understanding that we have to bring as parents calm. Yeah. That doesn't mean that we don't think it's serious, but when we are in a state of panic, we're not going to be thinking as clearly. We can do panic for like a short amount of time, but not long. So dialing down the panic and ushering in the calm is really important. Relying on optimism and humor, like it's just something that we as humans need, and we need it to get through time, and we also need it to clear our brain. It's like breathing in coffee to clear the scent. You have to like have humor in the days to sort of clear the air and get a reset. You know what I mean? I think this is also a time to really encourage our children to be activists. So the knee-jerk reaction is to shelter our kids from all of this and maybe only give them little bits of doses of the reality. Right. And to some extent, they don't need to be getting the minute by minute updates on the severity of the issue.
If you're trying to dial down the panic, then you have to limit their exposure, right?
And you have to limit your exposure to the news, right? Right. And your children's exposure. But the idea of building activists is important right now, and it's going to pay off in 5 years, which seems so far from me.
Yeah. Oh, Joe.
So like build.
I'm losing you. Okay, go ahead. Let's start that again. 5 years from now, it's going to pay off.
I think when we talk about building activists, it feels like something very far outreaching, and it might serve us 5 years from now, but that's what families have to start looking at. How are we going to survive this and come out of this and rebound from this virus 5 years from now, right? And those of us who can think about building activists in our community, our children, right? Building activists in our children, I think that's going to be one of the ways we rebound. So I teach my kids to look at things. Yeah. And I teach them to respond to things. And I show them what's happening in the world, and then I expect them to do it on their level. So as an example, I have my 14-year-old said, well, it is just unjust, Mom, that you get to drink coffee and we don't. I guess because I've been drinking more coffee recently, but he said, look, the distribution of coffee in this house is unfair, and caffeine does not do all the bad things that you think, and there's more caffeine and regular things than you think, and we're getting caffeine anyway, so why limit my intake of caffeine? Right. It was annoying and it was silly, but I got his point. He noticed something that was unfair. He made a point. He protested for 12 hours. In the end, you still can't drink coffee in my house as a kid, but you can. I lowered the age. So when you're in high school, you can down. Okay. But so this is a very sort of silly moment that we had. Yeah. And it was an expression of his activism, and I encourage that. And I think we need to encourage our children, not shelter them in this moment, but encourage them to notice and recognize disparities, and then to fight against them to change, because we're going to need change makers coming. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So this show is called On the Clock, right? And I wanted it to be that because we're doing this during the work day, even though our work days have changed dramatically and the hours when we work have shifted as well. But, I do think it's so important. It's so easy when you sort of have a day that seems to never end in a way. There's that
Yeah.
Groundhog Day reality, like Saturday might as well be Wednesday, might as well be Tuesday. We're losing days. I know I've lost a couple of days during weeks because of the sort of similarity each day. But it's so important, I think, to drill down on this time and make it as useful as it can possibly be.
Mm-hmm.
So when you wake up each morning and you approach each day, you think about what's ahead. I know that you have these sort of rituals and disciplines that sort of help take you through each day, but how have those rituals changed given all of this? And how much time do you spend controlling your thoughts? Because that's such a big part of this.
You know me, I try to control everything. And in these moments, we realize that as much as you want to control the world, will not let you control her. And I think the thing that I recognize is what stands between life and death right now is humanity. So I know the virus looks like the thing that is this evil, but really what stands between life and death is humanity. How we as humans respond, how we interact, how we treat, how we listen. And so I've been trying to be in that moment more.
Yeah.
So that looks like staying in bed an hour longer in the mornings. It looks like allowing my kid, who's demanding to sit at the head of the table for some odd reason, like he's the leader of the house, to let him take that seat once in a while. I don't know, to mix it up. So I have rituals, right? And I respect the ritual and the tradition. I'm from a Southern family, Black Southern family. I love tradition and rituals. But in these moments, I just say, okay, well, that's not how we normally do it. But tonight, let's do it differently. Let's go crazy, right?
Yeah.
And I think I hope that's been appreciated by the kids and by the other 3 adults that are in the house with me. But it's one step at a time. I'm not as flexible as I need to be either with my folks. And so it looks like, I guess what I'm trying to say is, it's moment to moment. I have a big picture of being flexible, being compassionate, listening, and going a lot slower. And in that, I'm making all kinds of mistakes, but I keep going back to those principles. And then the day will flow as it flows.
Yeah. Let's hit a couple of sort of quick hit things, right? I'm gonna throw out some words and just tell me in this current moment, and it might just be today, right now, how these things resonate for you, what they mean to you. Faith.
Deep.
Fear.
Am I giving one-word answers, or can I elaborate?
You can come at it however you want.
My faith has deepened. I mean, in all of my trying moments where people have said, well, how does faith play into this? I've gone a bit deeper. And so I have to tell you, I'm not doing all of the Zoom Sundays. Sometimes I'll pop on and watch my pastor at Abyssinian live, but mostly it is prayer at dinner time when we're all sitting down. It is prayer at night to say thank you. It is prayer to ask questions. And it is a faith in this like larger understanding that we have as humans infringed on the earth and on the animal, and then just asking forgiveness for that, and dialing back. So my faith has deepened.
Fear.
Oh, wow. I've had a lot of fear around sustainability of the family. And that has shown up in my annoyed tone, my snappiness with people, my, urgency to trim our expenses quickly. I say, look, if you're gonna let the water run, you're throwing dollars away.
Right.
If you're taking paper towels, drying your hands and throwing those paper towels in the garbage, we're wasting our money. So fear of how do we sustain ourselves? And that, I tell you, that keeps me up at night.
Yeah.
No joke.
Yeah.
And it's like, and I think sometimes, and I'm hearing myself talk right now, and that fear that I just talked about, we're on very small levels of, paper towel and food. But if I take a step back and really look at that, what I'm saying and what I'm asking myself is, the way we used to do it, does that work?
Right.
And we know it doesn't. And so
Right.
I'm looking at the small things and the big things and trying to think of, how do we move forward? And that is fear, because it's fear of the unknown.
Right.
Yeah.
Freedom.
Ooh, I take a run every day for about 30 minutes in my neighborhood, and that feels like freedom. My breathing is intense, my mobility, right? I'm not in one house. So freedom for me right now is just a run, a 30-minute run through Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. We got to find our freedom.
Yeah. Creativity.
This has blossomed in our house. So I've always been a creative person, and I use it in my daily activities. But right now, so we do creative moments at dinner time every night. So it's either a series of riddles or a crossword puzzle or a game. I just finished my children's book, which is called Born Ready, a true story of a boy named Penelope. And so I'm constantly trying to be creative, because for me, that just lubricates the mind. And I feel, like I can make it through the next day, month, year. And so I've been encouraging my kids to be creative.
And when is your children's book coming out?
Ooh, child. I thought all I had to do was write it.
This has settled all the schedules, right?
Well, I thought I just write the book and then it comes out. The illustrator has been so specific with the details, and that just finished. And then you have to, so I think, by the end of the year, you'll see it on shelves.
Yeah.
Sorry?
That's exciting. Something to look forward to. I think having things to look forward to becomes magnified now.
Yeah. And the thing about we all want to know what happens in the future, but that future is partially determined by right now. Yeah. So we gotta create these things. And that goes back to my idea of reimagination and imagination, and how that's not a silly thing. If we can sit down and start to draw things out, and if we can sit down and start to map things out visually, with our kids, with ourselves, it just feels like we're part of the solution. So I actually got some coloring books and some sketch pads and some pens. I really don't like drawing because I feel I'm not very good at it, but we're going to be doing that at the dinner table, sketching and drawing.
Yeah. So the last thing, time. When we do eventually reach something beyond this time, we don't know what it's going to be. But what is your hope for the ultimate gifts that this time gives us?
Right. If we don't hear the message in this moment, then what has it been for? I think I would love for us to have a sense of compassion, humanity, stillness, right? Many of us are learning to be still. And here's a big one. I've been thinking a lot about this, biomimicry. And that is I'm not a scientist, but what I take from biomimicry is that you look at biology, you look at nature, and then you mimic it, right? And so a lot of our interesting technologies, like the thing that you go through in the airport when you do your hands up like this.
Oh, yeah.
The detector.
Yeah.
It's based on echolocation, how bats see from sound waves, right? So that's biomimicry. And I think, okay, what can we learn from this? How do we mimic nature and not try to make nature mimic technology, but really use ourselves or mimic ourselves after nature and use our technology to enhance nature, but not to fight against it. So if we can come up with ways to be more like nature and like biology, and I'm not saying X out technology, I'm saying use technology to mimic nature, I think we'll be better off. I think that the learning right now is about listening to nature. And I'm not a tree hugger, but it's it is so clear right now that we have screwed with nature. How fast we go, how large our footprint has been, how sloppy we are, how many things we do a day. I mean, we need to dial it back. It is unnatural, and right now we're seeing unsafe to fly to 3 different cities in 3 days, like I was doing. right?
Right.
So do less. If we could do less and still be the humans that we want to be, that would be
Right.
amazing.
Amazing. Yeah, unnatural, unsafe, and we are now unfortunately being shown unsustainable.
Unsustainable.
So, the sustainability issue is huge. Jodie, thank you so much.